Hey, what's up, DDO players? Axel here. So today I wanted to go through the revised Warpriest tree, and I'd gotten several requests to do this video. I think some people were asking me like why I hadn't put out a video on this yet. The reason is because I was waiting for it to go through feedback and revisions. I wanted to wait until I thought it was in a more final state. So the tree, for those of you all who don't know, they are doing passes to Warpriest and Warsoul for favorite souls and clerics in the coming update. They're trying to buff the tree and improve it, and they've done so in several ways. So we're going to see that soon in update 39. And in this video, I wanted to go through it just to give my honest pros and cons and criticisms and praises and such of the tree. Because there is a lot to talk about, and this is the pass that I personally have been waiting for years, honestly, since they've even started doing these enhancement passes. Warpriest has been one of the weakest trees in the game for a long time. And it's really not a tree that you want to really use. And I put out a video years and years ago, probably 2-3 years ago, talking about why. We'll link in the video if you're not, if you haven't seen that by chance. But anyways, so let's go ahead and go through the tree as it is right now in Lamania. Now, the tree has gone through one phase of feedback and revisions already. It's now in what they're calling preview 2 of this, and the reason I'm doing the video now instead of waiting until it's final is because there weren't really a lot of changes from preview 1 to preview 2. There were some minor changes, so I'm kind of assuming at this point, unless the developers have a really big change of heart, this is probably pretty much what we're going to see when it hits live. There might be a few more minor tweaks, and if there are major changes, I will probably do another video talking about those major changes, kind of updating things. But I thought that the tree was in a state right now where I could go ahead and talk about it. But this tree has been, in some form on Lamania on Lamania forums, definitely for a few weeks now. So let's go ahead and just start from the top. So goals. The goal of Warsoul and Warpriest is to add range support to these builds for Silver Flame builds. Bring overall weapon DPS up between bursts and plus weapon attacks. Additionally, giving favorite soul access to weapon criticals. So, obviously they wanted to increase the DPS in this tree. While obviously, now you have to keep in mind this is a melee divine tree. Obviously, with all the healing and buffs and utility that clerics and favorite souls have, you don't want the melee DPS of these classes to equal, say, like barbarian, monk, classes like that, and it shouldn't, because all the utility, it should be kind of second-rate DPS because you're sacrificing DPS, melee DPS for utility and healing, so it makes sense. Devs also wanted to give this tree a few interesting things to do, which they have done. Its only attack skill right now is on a long cooldown. Yep, they have addressed that a little bit. They wanted to remove a few of the abilities that are huge action point sinks for minor benefit. They have done so to a large extent. A few I think they still need to address, but they have done so to some extent. Push Warpriest to have more defense than Warsoul. Push Warsoul to have more offense than Warpriest. I don't really agree with that design philosophy. I know they're looking for ways to differentiate the two trees, but these are both supposed to be, in my eyes, offensive melee, melee/range DPS builds, trees. So I don't really understand why you would want to try to shear, Warpriest towards defense. I mean, clerics already have a lot in terms of defense, just with their healing abilities and such. I just don't see the need. I think they should both be all offensive trees, but that's a minor point. The trees are between Warsoul and Warpriest are very, very identical still. There's not a huge difference as far as offensive defense, and the main difference between that, what they seem to be doing with offensive defense, seems to be mainly at the level 20 core. But let's go ahead and get into the cores. Now, I will say that on Lamania, this tree has been really, the feedback for the tree from what I've seen has been overwhelmingly negative. So I'm going to try to do this. I've seen the developers actually getting bashed quite a bit, the developer that's working on this. So I want to try to make, even though I will say up front, I'm not very happy with the tree. I'm going to try to do this as respectfully as possible. Even though I will have a negative feedback, I want to do it in a way that's constructive. It conveys my opinions without, getting personal or anything like that. So, which, I mean, come on, if you're getting personal about a freaking enhancement tree on a Dungeons and Dragons video game, I mean, come on, have some perspective. All right. So, cores. Both Cleric and Favorite Soul versions, Core 1, Smite Foe is now a multi-selector with a ranged and melee version. Good, of course. They want to open some build possibilities for if you want to use a bow or something as a divine, so that's cool. Core 1, Smite Foe's cooldown has been reduced to 12 seconds, which is good. It needed to be reduced. Core 5, Warcaster, and this is actually one of the changes they made between feedback in round 1 and round 2. Core 5 was just haste. Now it's called Warcaster, and haste now grants a +1 competence bonus to critical threat range with your favorite weapon, in addition to other benefits. So you might think that, hey, yes, awesome, clerics are getting a +1 critical threat range buff. No, they're not, because it's a competence bonus, and competence bonus does not stack with Holy Sword, which is in War Domain, which is, as of right now on live, is, in my opinion, by a no-brainer choice for a melee cleric. So what they did is before the feedback, this core did not have the +1 threat competence critical threat range in it. So they added it in order to provide more competition for War Domain for your melee builds. Because as of right now, it was kind of a no-brainer to just go melee with your melee build to go with War Domain because of Holy Sword mainly. So this kind of lets you, if you want to choose a different domain as a melee divine or melee cleric, because favorite souls don't have the domains. But if you want to do that, you now aren't as pigeonholed into War Domain. Although I still think War Domain is going to be the best choice, because Holy Sword provides a +1 critical threat range boost and a +1 critical threat range multiplier. And unless this is a mistake, I'm seeing that this Warcaster looks like it's only going to be a competence bonus to critical threat range. So so it still seems to not compete as much, although it does narrow the gap, so that's good. So I like the change, although just be aware that this isn't really a buff from what we have on live right now. It's just something that kind of even balances their domains a little bit. Okay, Core 6, Implacable Foe's cooldown has been reduced to 3 minutes. And I have a lot to say on Implacable Foe, and I don't know if I want to do that now or, I'm going to go ahead and talk about that later. But I have a lot to say on Implacable Foe, which is the level 20 core for Warpriest. And by the way, my feedback is mainly oriented towards clerics, not so much favorite souls. So just keep that in mind, even though a lot of these things will apply to both. Okay, let's go to Tier 2, some of the changes they made. And again, when I go through these, I'm not going to mention every single ability in the Warpriest tree, because if something isn't mentioned, then it hasn't changed. The only things that are listed here are things that have changed from what's on live now. All right. So Tier 2, Inflame is no longer an action boost. It no longer has charges. It now has a 90-second cooldown. That's good. Inflame was one of those things in Warpriest that was ridiculously expensive. I think it's like 9 AP to get all its benefits, which include, I think saves boost and energy absorption. Is it energy absorption or resistance? I think it's energy absorption benefits. But now it's kind of been reduced. It's no longer an action boost. Inflame saving throws has been rolled into Greater Inflame. And basically, instead of having to pay 9 action points for all those benefits, basically they're all included now in one thing they're calling Greater Inflame, which includes it all. And I think right now, it's not mentioned on what you're seeing on the screen, but I think they've reduced it basically from 9 action points to 6. As far as I'm aware at this point, I still think that's a little bit too expensive. I would think more like 4 AP would be more of a better sweet spot for that. 6 AP still seems like it's pretty expensive. Okay, let's move now down. You see kind of highlighted here in green. This is a change from the round 1 feedback, which I gave feedback on this specifically, and I think other players did too, on Righteous Weapons, and they did listen to us on this and decide to change this. Righteous Wrathful Weapons no longer gives out a +1 enhancement bonus at each tier. Instead, when wielding your favorite weapon, you gain +1 to hit and damage and +3 universal spell power. Okay, so on live right now, it's a +1 enhancement bonus. And +1 enhancement bonus does include your +1 to hit and +1 damage. But because of the way they've changed the implement bonus on weapons, it wasn't giving you, with the enhancement bonus, it wasn't giving you your +3 universal spell power. So they changed this to make it more of a +1 hit and damage and +3 universal spell power to kind of give that back to you. And with this being kind of more of a melee oriented tree, that makes sense. And I've commented on past videos on this in the past that the enhancement bonus really didn't make sense for a melee tree, since one of the big things you used to get from that was the impellent bonus to your weapons. But since a few updates ago they changed that, so now they're just adding it back. So this isn't really a buff or anything. It's a minor buff, I guess, but it's really just a kind of a thing that makes it kind of the enhancement make more sense, and it makes it more readable. I think a lot of players kind of look at enhancement bonus, and they have to go to the wiki to kind of look up what that includes. So this makes it more clear that you're getting melee bonuses from this. So okay, I mean I don't really care about the +3 universal spell power. I mean, it's nice, so I guess that's something. I kind of wish they would instead take that away and add some more melee benefit. But even like +1 to hit and +2 damage instead of +1 to each and +3 universal would be better for me, but whatever. Let's go to tier 3. In Flame, energy absorption is now greater in Flame and has all the effects in Flame. We've already talked about this. Righteous Wrathful Weapons, we already talked about that. The reason it's mentioned again is because this Righteous Weapons exists in each tier of the Cleric tree. Okay, this is a big one. Tier 3, Magical Backlash has been moved to Tier 3, and I believe this was in Tier 5 before. I think currently on live it's on Tier 5. And this is a pretty big deal because this is one of the better abilities in the tree. What this does is Magical Backlash, when you get attacked by an enemy caster, what Magical Backlash does is has a 10% chance to basically perform a command spell on that enemy, and there's no save for Magical Backlash. So 10% of the time you get an enemy caster attacking you, they get knocked in their butts basically. So it's basically a passive crowd control ability. So it's really cool. I'm glad they put it in Tier 3. It makes it now something you can get if you just want to splash Warpriest. Burden of Sin is now gone, which is good because Burden of Sin was, I really ripped into that before, and it's just not good. So I'm glad they've gotten rid of that. Okay, it's replaced with Radiant Flourish, a multi-select melee range +1, 2, 3 weapon attack, which adds 1d6, 2d6, 3d6 light damage that scales with 200% of melee or range powers. Small chance to blind non-enemy bosses. Okay, so that's kind of nice. It'll probably be useful. It's okay. It'll be useful in heroics, so that's good. But I see it being replaced in the future with. Maybe not replaced, but there's a lot of really good cleaves, like stuff like Lay Waste, for example, in your Epic Destinies that will make it probably less useful in Epics after level 20 than it is in Heroics from a practical standpoint. But it's still okay. I don't really understand the math completely on how the scaling works with the 200% of melee power. So I really would have to clarify. Really would have to look more into that and do the math before I could really, I guess, give a very informed opinion on how good it is, but it seems okay for now. Okay, Tier 4 Light Guard is gone, which is good. Light Guard was awful. It was replaced with Light Guard. For those of you who don't know, it was like a passive defense ability. Every time you got hit, it did a little bit of light damage to the enemy, but it was really low. It just wasn't worth it. So it's fine that they brought that out. Now they replaced it, which is probably the best ability in the tree right here. A +10% double strike or double shot multi-selector. That's amazing. You can now splash in this tree. It is Tier 4, but there's still enough pretty good stuff in this tree, like Magical Backlash, maybe a few other abilities here that might make splashing this tree worth it, but plus 10% double strike is pretty darn good. I have to kind of go through my build and see, what I'm gonna have to give up to get the 10% double strike, but that's really, really good, and it's kind of the main thing I would want from this tree is the 10% double strike here. Okay, new ability, Silence of the Wicked, another plus weapon attack, and it's kind of a crowd control ability. Affected enemy can't cast spells for 4 seconds. I don't really understand this one completely. I don't understand if there's a save or not. They don't really explain that, so I don't really know for now how good that's going to be. Although the 4-second duration kind of sucks, although I can see this being pretty good in some situations. Maybe you run up and hit a beholder with this, for example. That could be pretty good. Although it is a 10-second cooldown, so you can't spam it, and you can't have this ability active at all times. So I don't know. I really don't know how good this will be. It'll be something I'll have to kind of experiment with and play around with before I can get a feel for how good it is. So I'm pretty open to that as of right now. Okay, tier 5. Righteous Wrathful Weapons, they've kind of buffed the light damage. The light damage is now 10d6 light damage that lasts for 12 seconds and scales with the higher of melee and range power at 200%. Divine Vessel functionality has been altered in many ways and is now passive. Your attacks generate a stack of Divine Conduit. Okay, for those of y'all who don't know how this works, is in the past, this ability basically, you could build up stacks of Divine Conduit. I think you could build up to 20 or 25, depending on if you're a level 20 cleric or not. And once all your stacks are cleared up, are built up, it would kind of do an area of effect attack that was based on, I think it was based on light and fire spell power. I think it is on live. Someone check me on that. But they've changed this, they've buffed it, they've made the DPS better, and they've changed it so it appears, if I'm interpreting this correctly, they've changed it so you can now hold onto it and trigger it manually instead of it just being out of your control. Because what's happened before is when you build up your 25 stacks, the ability would instantly fire. You couldn't save it or anything. Now, if I'm reading this right, the way they're explaining this here, when Divine Conduit reaches 25, all stacks are cleared and you gain 1 charge of this attack. Max uses 1, you may continue to gain stacks of Divine Conduit, but will not gain another charge until you expend your existing one. So the way I'm reading that, interpreting that, is that you can now save your stacks of Divine Conduit and expend them as you please, but it doesn't let you build up those stacks infinitely. You can only build up 1. You cannot gain another charge until you use it. So that's good, because a lot of times it would build up and like one kobold or something would go and slap you and it would just fire, and it's like, man, I wish I could save that for when I had 8 skeletons surrounding me or something. But you can do that now, so that's good. So it's gotten a buff. I'm not sure if it's that significant of a buff, but it's something. The other problem, what I've always had with this ability is, as you can kind of read here, affected enemies are hit by a meteor, taking 1 to 4 fire and 1 to 4 light damage per character level. Damage from meteor is affected by fire and light spell power, but as a Warpriest, you're not going to have fire and light spell power, so I wish it wasn't dependent on that, because Warpriest is not a caster. You're not going to be gearing and really casting fire and light spell power, although that could be changing because they have now put into the tree, and this is off topic, and I'm probably going to do another video on this, but they've introduced a new universal enhancement tree called Falconry, which now allows wisdom to strength and to hit. I mean, not to strength. It now allows wisdom to hit and damage. So that kind of threw. I really have to think about this because it's really kind of threw a monkey wrench into cleric builds. So I don't know how good or how. Right now, before I think about more, I don't know how viable it is going to be to build, say, like a strength-based melee cleric that dumps wisdom, as opposed to a wisdom-based cleric that goes falconry and uses wisdom to hit and damage and builds that way. I have to really experiment and with the builds on live and maybe do some brainstorming, because there is some opportunity cost to investing in falconry, and there's gearing issues. So you can't, if you gear all you can't really fit all your caster gear on at the same time as your melee gear. For example, you can't carry a caster stick if you're a character that's built to hit things with a great axe. You know, you can't carry a great axe in caster sticks in both hands at the same time. So I don't know yet on that. That's probably a good topic for a future video, the falconry tree, and how viable I think wisdom to hit and damage is compared to strength. So let's keep going here. Divine Vessel has been completely remade. Divine Power is now a +6 sacred bonus to strength. That's good. That's something I've kind of harped on in my past video. The one from years ago is Divine Power. Before, you already had the spell before, and it didn't stack. It wasn't enhanced. It didn't stack with your gearing strength bonuses before. So now it's a sacred bonus. So it does stack. So that's good. It gives you something now. And I think it does also stack. It should also stack with Divine Might. I believe Divine Might is an insights strength to bonus. And this is another thing I need to keep in mind when I'm talking wisdom to hit and damage in a future video, because Divine Power, you're not gonna be able to benefit from this because you won't be strength based. So, anyways, let's keep going. So Cleric, Warpriest only cores. Okay, now it's time to talk about Implacable Foe. Okay, Implacable Foe is now a multi-selector. All versions have the same effects. And you can now choose from taking Implacable Foe with +2 strength and +2 con, or +2 con and +2 wisdom. So, if you're going to be wiz-based or strength-based, it gives you two options there. Still not really +2 to a stat. Two different stats. Okay, that's nice. I mean, more con is always great. More wisdom, strength, that's always good. But for a capstone ability, it's not really that great. Now, Implacable Foe is what the devs appear to be targeting as the main reason to go level 20 Warpriest, because this is Implacable Foe exists in the final core, the level 20 core. So you have to be pure Cleric to get this, pure Cleric Warpriest. And what Implacable Foe does is it is a 10% damage bonus to all allies, and it lasts. I'll pull up, if I can, I'll pull up the actual description here, but it's a little bit complicated in how it works. Basically, I think it lasts for a maximum of 18 seconds, but you have to be in range of the Cleric for it to refresh, I think every 3 or 4 seconds. So it's basically, 10% damage to all allies is really good, obviously. I mean, that's huge, especially in raids. That's huge, but it did have a 5-minute cooldown, and now has been reduced to a 3-minute cooldown by the developers here. And I think they're kind of targeting, the reason to go Warpriest is not really to have the best melee DPS, it's to have this great buffing ability. And this is one I definitely need to do some math on, because I don't have. There's so many factors that can go into that 10%, and when you start combining this with other classes, and you combine this with other classes, Fury shotting and Legendary Dreadnoughts going into Blitz and things like that. I mean, I think this stacks with everything, so it can add up to some really good DPS. But at the end of the day, I still feel like the core at 20 isn't worth it, because while Implacable Foe is good, it's really limited. And it's really, really niche. So it's not something that it's just really hard to implement, because it has these proximity requirements, has refresh requirements, and the duration is so short. And the cooldown, while way better, it was 5 minutes. It's still pretty long at 3 minutes. And if it's going to be the main, while it's really good to have a plus 10% damage boost, obviously, if it's going to be like the only thing, like the main reason to go level 20, it doesn't seem like it's enough. Like, I honestly would like to see the abilities scrapped and something more general put in for clerics. Like, give us some kind of DPS boost or buff that's going to be maybe not as good in that short duration, but make it kind of available more often, rather than the main reason for going level 20 Warpriest being a buff that only lasts for like maximum of 18 seconds and has a 3-minute cooldown. I mean, that kind of sucks. That means you're not benefiting at all from being a level 20 cleric, like 2 minutes and 42 seconds. of the time. So like the vast majority of the time you're playing. So it's rough. I really would like to see something more general DPS boost, especially since you give up a lot by going 20 Warpriest, like by doing pure 20 Cleric on a melee Cleric build. You get so much now from, I mean, think about if you go 3 Paladin or something, or if you go like what my current build is, which is 15 Cleric, 4 Paladin, 1 Fighter, you get tons from Paladin because how good Sacred Defender stance is. So by going level 20 pure Cleric just for Implacable Foe, you're giving up so much. When you go 3 or 4 Paladin, you get Sacred Defender stance, you get HP bonuses, you get Divine Grace, which gives you a huge save bonus based on your Charisma modifier, which, Clerics typically, do have Charisma unless you dump it, but it's a really good reason to put Charisma on your Cleric in the first place, in addition for it on a Cleric charging your number of turns you get. So by giving up your Paladin splashes, you're losing tons of HP, tons of saves. You're giving up what else? Anything you might potentially want to invest in Knights of the Chalice. By giving up your fighter, you're giving up free feats. Like for a fighter, you get a free feat, and that's huge on Clerics, which is because Cleric being a feat starved class. So you give up a lot by by going pure Warpriest. And if you're gonna give up all those splashes, they need to have something that's more worth it. What I would like to see is Implacable Foe scrapped, and there would be kind of more of a DPS boost in Warpriest. It would be really nice if the option, the hard choice you had to have between splashing on your melee Cleric and not splashing was that, say if you went 20 Cleric, there was a really big DPS boost in that 20 Cleric on that Cleric Warpriest capstone. Which would make you have to choose between, hey, do you want DPS of going pure Warpriest and get that really good capstone, which gives you that good DPS boost, or do you want to splash and go Paladin for all the survivability from the Sacred Defender stance? So that's what I would like to see, is a choice between pure Warpriest, pure melee divine, and splash melee divine to be a choice between survivability or DPS. I would really like to see that. I think that would be a really good thing. So I'm not sure right now that Implacable Foe is enough, although, developers, if they could run some numbers and show us how they're in some circumstances. I mean, maybe you got several, if you run in a raid and you've got your other 11 party members benefiting from this, and you've got multiple Fury Shotters and Blitzers and stuff in there, maybe in that circumstance, it's really good and really worth giving a pure 20 Warpriest that raid slot, as opposed to your instead of a standard DPS team. Maybe it's worth it in that case. So I don't know. Again, I haven't really run the math, so that would be a good criticism of what I'm saying right now. So, if someone could run the math, or a developer could run the math, maybe one of you guys could run the math and kind of show that it's worth it, that would be cool. But as of right now, I would like to see something more generally useful rather than something that's so niche. But hey, if the developers really want to make Warpriest, pure 20 Warpriest focused on a raid buffing kind of tune archetype, then I hope if one of the developers would maybe show the math as to why that's worth it, or maybe another player that has the time to do that, more time than me. So that would be great. Okay, let's move on. I've spent a lot of time on Implacable Foe, although it's really important being the capstone, and also it was worth spending all that time on it. So tier 2, new action boost, melee and range power. Okay, that's good. It helps you compete with human, so human PDK. So because that for a long time has been really the default race for Clerics, just because they get the free feat and they get the action boost to melee range power. They get healing amp stuff. So that's another thing that helps other races be more competitive with human, because human, I think, has been the best. Again, as I said, I think has been the best choice for Clerics for a long time. All right, tier 5, new. While wearing heavy armor, you gain plus 10 PRR, plus 10 MR, plus 10 AC, and plus 50% to threat gen with melee and ranged attacks. Divine power is now 1 AP. Okay, so this is one thing I wrote a lot about on the Lamania forums today. It may not be today as the time you're seeing this, but as the time of today is time of the recording. I wrote a lot on this, because I don't really understand the plus 50% threat gen with melee and ranged here. I don't understand what builds are supposed to benefit from this, because as I said again, you can get this plus 50% threat gen and a lot more bonuses in terms of saves and HP and everything for your tanking purposes by splashing Paladin. So I don't really understand with Sacred Defender stance. So I don't really understand how a pure 20 cleric is going to be, and this is in the level 24, I believe. So I don't understand how Warpriests are supposed to, that are pure 20, are supposed to compete with, say, builds like 17 cleric, 3 paladin that want to tank. Like, if you want to build a tanking cleric, it seems to me like obviously you want to splash 3 paladin or 4 paladin. So I would kind of like to see the argument from the devs, or what they're kind of what they're pointing out with this. Like, what's their design intent? Because I really honestly don't understand this, because the vast majority of cleric builds are not going to want threat gen. This is actually a hindrance in this, on this tree. Of course, the 10 MMR and PRR is great, but me personally, I would rather just have that in the AC and not have the 50% threat gen. I mean, it's not good. I mean, generally, obviously your healer generally doesn't want aggro. If your healer dying is normally in a raid or in a quest, is normally the last person you want to have die, because that's the person that's best at raising other people. So you really don't want threat gen on a cleric. And if for some reason you did want a niche tanking ability, a tanking build on a cleric that had threat gen and benefited from threat gen, it seems obvious to me that you would want to splash paladin for that, and it seems paladin splash would be way better for that purpose. So it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know what they're going for here, so I hope they kind of explain that. And I did kind of ask them to explain that in the forums. Okay, I don't really have a lot to say about the favored soul cores. This is where they wanted to make favored soul a little bit more offensive, so the passive benefits are a little bit better in terms of offense, but a little worse in terms of defense on Implacable Foe. So +4 strength, +4 whiz, +4 chop, instead of having that split between your primary offensive stat and constitution. So that's that. And tier 5 favorite souls, War Souls, getting Divine Champion. While wearing medium armor, you gain +5% double strike, +5% double shot, +5 to confirm the critical hits and critical hit damage. And Divine Power for them now grants a +1 competence bonus to critical multiplier with weapons. So the Divine Champion gives them a kind of a perk to staying in medium armor, which is good, because for those of you all who don't know, favored souls, unlike clerics get heavy armor proficiency naturally. Favored souls do not. Favored souls only get medium armor proficiency. So this gives favored soul a reason to stay in medium armor, kind of as lore would suggest for them. So that's good. They get a little more DPS for staying in medium. If they want to go heavy, they're going to give up some DPS in exchange, so it gives them a hard choice, so that's good. Now, Divine Power gave this competence bonus to critical multiplier with weapons. This is kind of in order to compete with what clerics get in War Domain, and now the cleric haste core, which also now gives the competence bonus to critical multiplier. Now, keep in mind that I think this is critical multiplier, whereas something like Holy Sword is critical multiplier and critical threat range. And let me correct myself. The Warcaster in Core 5 for Cleric is just a +1 competence bonus to critical threat range. So I'm kind of wondering if they intended to do this. Did they intend actually to give them critical multiplier and critical threat range? I don't know if this is a typo or if they just want to give them the critical multiplier. But in any case, they're putting this in to help favored souls, help supplement what let favored souls compete with what clerics get in War Domain. So this is kind of their substitute for Holy Sword in War Domain, basically is what it is. So that's good. That's cool. So now, whether you're a favored soul melee or a cleric melee, it's going to be pretty easy to get your competence bonus to critical multiplier. If you're if you're going all out Warpriest or favored soul, you're going to be able to get that, and you won't be as far as cleric goes, you won't be as pigeonholed into one domain, and favored souls are just going to get it with this enhancement. So let's get into my overall thoughts. I think that there's some abilities here that are good for splashing in Warpriest, such as the 10% double strike is really appealing. I think Magical Backlash being in tier 3 is really nice. I mean, that's a really good, considering it has no save, that's a pretty darn good crowd control ability. I mean, 10% of the time, enemy caster just goes and basically falls on their butt, which is great. No save. Obviously doesn't work on bosses, but there's some good stuff like that. You get Divine Might to splash by, but I think that the problem with the tree is that I still don't see enough reason to go pure Warpriest, to go 20 Warpriest. So I think the tree overall, with the changes they've made, I think what's going to happen is people are going to use it now to splash in, and that's good. Before it was just, as on live right now, but before this enhancement pass, it just wasn't good really for much, but except for Divine Might, maybe a couple other abilities in there to splash for as far as getting the low-hanging fruit in the enhancement tree, but it didn't have a lot of use really at all. But so now the tree is good for splashing, I think. I mean, that 10% double strike is really appealing, and as I mentioned, there's a few other abilities there that are really nice that you can go for. But the problem is I don't see enough reason to go pure 20 Warpriest, and that's honestly what I would like to do with my build. And I don't see enough reason to do that. And now we've got the falconry tree, which kind of, as I mentioned before, I may do another video on that. I'm thinking I might do that, which is now offering to hit and damage with wisdom, which you would think that should be in the Warpriest tree, right? The Warpriest tree, but it's not. It's in the falconry tree. So it seems right now, at least, and again, this, I think a good criticism of what I'm saying here is that I haven't gone through the math, which I admit I haven't on some of the abilities, but it seems to me, just first glance here, that the falconry tree is actually going to be better as far as a build that wants to actually kind of go full out investing in a tree. I would probably lean towards falconry right now over Warpriest if I'm going full on Warpriest, or want to go full on melee divine in splashing this tree instead of just splashing. So the falconry tree has a lot of really good stuff in it. So there's a lot of really good things, I think, in that tree that might be overshadowing Warpriest right now. So if you're in a melee divine, you want to go all out melee divine, I think you might be better going falconry right now. I'd have to think about that a little bit more, like I said, and play around with more of these enhancements. But that's just my first impression. I'm not saying that's final. I'm not saying that's going to change. I'm not saying that's not going to change potentially. And I need to actually get on live with these. Maybe Lamania, and kind of play around with some of these and some of the abilities, kind of mess around with to see how useful they are, particularly ones like what was the one? There's the one ability that made it in Warpriest that made it so Silence of the Wicked, for example, that made it so the effective enemy can't cast spells for 4 seconds. I want to play around with abilities like that to see how good it really is. But for right now, it seems like Warpriest, all in all, in Warsoul is going to be a good splash tree, but not enough reason there's not enough reason there for you to go like full out tier 20 cleric, 20 favored soul, all out 20 cleric. It still seems like paladin splash just is so good. It seems like it's going to be what you want to do still on your melee divine. I mean, paladins you get so much from Sacred Defender stance, from going paladin for divine grace. It's just so good. And I really don't think that Implacable Foe, while plus 10 damage being really good, and again, I hope people post more math on this to show some evidence that it is worth it. But right now, it just seems like that's not enough of enough reason for me personally to go 20 cleric and to go, to give up all those paladin and fighter type splashes. So yeah, guys, that's just my initial thoughts. If there are major changes once this is live, or maybe in a further pass on Lamani, if there's another preview, I don't want to commit completely because I'm pretty busy, but in real life, but I will try to do another video if there is major changes that make me reevaluate my opinion. So guys, I'll put links to the feedback threads and stuff for this in the description below, so that you can go there and kind of read what the developers have been posting and maybe give your feedback as well. So I hope that was a good impression of what I think now, and while I'm a little bit disappointed with the tree, I hope this at least gave the developers my criticisms in a way that is just honest and not overly critical. I don't intend to be overly critical. I hope I don't sound that way. I'm just trying to be like bluntly honest here. So guys, yeah, let me know what you think. That's gonna be it for this video. I will see you all next time. I'm with update 39 coming. I'm planning right now. I'm thinking, even though I've been pretty inactive on the channel the past few weeks, I think I'll probably do some update 39 type videos, because there's a lot in update 39. So you'll probably see more videos from me in the not so distant future. That's gonna be it for today, guys. That'll be all. Hope you all enjoyed. I will see you all next time. Have a good one. Take care.